Hey everyone, I'm Jaxby, and today I want to talk about monitor resolutions, maybe a little bit about frame rates, but mostly monitor resolutions and how they affect part choices for a gaming PC. Now, the reason why I want to do this for like a gaming PC is because basically that's probably going to be the biggest use case where monitor resolution size is probably going to make a massive impact on hardware choices. So let's get to it. Firstly, I guess if you want to look at monitors in the sense of there's three main sizes, like three standard 16 by 9 sizes for the aspect ratio. You got 1080p, which is 1920 by 1080, 1440p, which is 2560 by 1440p, and 4K, which 3820 by 2560. I think I've got that one wrong. I'll probably correct myself in editing. So let's talk about hardware for 1080p. So 1080p is not very taxing at all. It's actually very simple to for graphics cards to make each frame. And with it being such an easy resolution to make, it also means that when the graphics card renders the frame, it can get to the next frame as soon as the CPU is ready to accept the next frame. So generally, for a 1080p machine, you're generally pretty good with an i5 or an R5. With a GPU that's for NVIDIA ending in 60 or for AMD ending in 600, they're generally the product ranges for product tiers, I guess, for graphics cards for NVIDIA and AMD that look towards 1080p gaming. Those cards aren't expensive in comparison, consider today's market, to like 3080s. Basically, if you're going for 1080p, you're going for not necessarily budget. Like you can do budget, but more so price to performance. Basically, when I'm saying like these parts, I do want to mention that I'm not saying that's the end all and be all and end all. What basically, you don't have to go, Jaxby said it, I have to do it. No, you like when I first built my computer, slightly more than 1080p was in a weird in between 1080p and 1440p, but I picked a card for 1080p gaming. It works well. I'm just saying, like, for a reasonable build. Depending on the CPU, you might get away with an i3, but generally an i5 and an R5 is enough for gaming, and that's what you're looking for as a bare minimum for a gaming CPU. And for 1080p, the main bottleneck won't be the graphics card, it won't be the RAM, it will be the CPU, because the GPU will be able to render out frames very quickly, and the CPU's got to push them through and accept them as quickly as possible. For 1440p, you probably can get away with an i5 or an R5, especially an R5. This is before 12th gen Intel, by the way. You're definitely looking towards, for NVIDIA for the GPU, a card ending with 70 and very similar for AMD, ending in 700. They're a little bit more beefed up from the 60 series cards. From cards made for 1080p, so they're able to handle the extra workload harder. 1440p is like a really good in between. It's getting more popular, but it's a really good in between 1080p and 4K, because as the resolution gets higher, it's more taxing on the GPU, less taxing on the CPU. But 1440p is like in this nice middle ground where you can get away with a lot, I reckon. Personally, I reckon that you can get away with a lot. But CPU wise, yeah, you probably can get away with an i5, but you're probably beginning to look more so at an i7 or an R7. For 4K, you're definitely looking at going with like a 3080, for example, so a card from NVIDIA ending in 80, or a card from AMD ending in 800. For your CPU, you probably more look like If you're getting yourself a 3080, let's face it, you're probably going to be getting yourself at least an i7 or an R7, possibly even higher. But if you're just doing gaming, I don't see why an R7 or an i7 won't be powerful enough to handle the frame rate. So at 4K, you want to get the lowest amount of frame rate in AAA titles. Obviously, if it's an esports title, it's easier to get a higher frame rate because that's what they're designed for. They're designed so that, one, a potato can play the game, but also so that you get the most FPS out of those titles. But for a AAA game in 4K, you're looking at one of the lowest FPS counts just because there are so many pixels, so much detail for the graphics card to draw. Obviously, the higher the resolution, the higher end the hardware is. If you're trying to aim for something like 120 FPS, because you've got like a G-Sync panel that does up to 120 Hertz, again, that can actually affect your hardware needs, but you may need to go with a more high-end graphics card depending on your monitor. I think probably the better way of looking at it is if you are playing AAA games on a 1080p panel with a 360, and it's a 360 Hertz panel, and yeah, AAA games, you might want to go with 3070. You might want to go with something that's a bit more beefed up so that when you play the AAA games, you get the most out of your monitor. Just a thought. But other things that like monitor resolution affects, obviously, the higher the resolution, the more high-end hardware that you need. So you might need a better motherboard that can handle a better power delivery, but the biggest, and maybe also better cooling as well. Like, let's face it, you might go from, you know what, an air cooler will work, a tower cooler will work, to, you know what, I need to get a all-in-one liquid cooler to handle the heat. But another thing that will get affected by your monitor choice, because that affects your graphics card and CPU choice, is also your power supply. Okay? Because as you go up, higher end hardware have higher power draws. And for those that have monitors in weird in between, because personally I got ultra wide, I game on ultra wide 1440p monitor. So my main gaming display, the display I game on is 3440 by 1440p. So there's a lot more pixels than a normal 1440p panel. Again, I could be wrong about that resolution. So my hardware requirements are just on the resolution itself, in between 3070, 3080, but I went with 3080 because my monitor is also a 120 Hertz panel, and I want to get the most out of that refresh rate as well as the amount of pixels on that monitor. And obviously, the lower you go, the less high-end hardware you need. If you're going to go like ultra budget monitor that is like 720p, so just standard HD, then you can get away with so much more. You probably can actually just go with like a Ryzen APU just by itself and handle most esport titles with ease, and probably some more demanding titles as well. But anyway, I hope that this helps someone out. I really do. Do hit that subscribe button down below if you enjoyed the video, and hit that like button too. And I hope to see you all in my next video. See ya.